You're listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. It's 11:02 Central Time, 12:02 Eastern Time. We now bring you the Quest for a Culture of Life in America with Steve Koob.
Hello, Radio Maria listeners. Welcome back to the Quest for a Culture of Life in America. Our guest today is Kevin Symonds. He's a theologian, lives in Michigan, and he writes and speaks about Our Lady of Fatima, the secret of Fatima, and other apparitions and other topics. He's very broad-ranged. He was born in Massachusetts. In 2003, he received his BA in Theological Studies from Ohio's Franciscan University of Steubenville, with an emphasis on the classical languages. That emphasis on classical languages had been enormously helpful to him in his research, because so many of the original documents that you should use when you're doing research are written in other languages than English. And so he's got himself proficient in several languages. 3 years later, he obtained his MA degree in Theological Studies, also from Franciscan. He specializes in the Catholic Church's theology of private revelation. Private revelation is a terminology that the Church uses for, I think, all apparitions by Mary and other saints and the Holy Trinity, etc. Because we don't have to believe in them. We're not part of the dogmatic teaching of the Church. But you can, and they're very helpful for most people, I think. Anyway, let's see, what else? He is a member of the Mariological Society of America, and as I said, he lives in Michigan. I met Kevin for the first time online 2 weeks ago at the Mariological Society of America's annual meeting, which was a Zoom meeting. So that's the first time I ever saw Kevin, and I didn't talk to him, I don't think, that day, but we've talked since that time. So he's the author of 3 books. The first one is Pope Leo XIII on the prayer of St. Michael, and another one is, what is it? Something about light. I can't read it. Kevin, are you there?
I am.
Help me out.
Actions of Light is my first book. Pope Leo XIII and the Prayer to St. Michael is the second, and on the third part of the Secret of Fatima was the third.
Oh, okay. What's the light one about your first book?
Refractions of Light, it's kind of in the subheading, but it's 201 answers on apparitions, visions in the Catholic Church. So it just kind of, almost like in a catechism kind of a format, but it's not a catechism, is just kind of goes over what does the Church teach about private revelation? What is it? How does she discern these things? What's the difference between like an apparition versus a vision? You know, and those general kind of topics would be of interest to that sort of subject.
Wow. So that's the background for the Secret of Fatima study that you did on the third part of the Secret of Fatima, sounds like.
Yes. My broader interest is in the Church's theology of private revelation. It just seems as though over the past few years I've been kind of caught up in Fatima studies. So, but there is that broader focus, of course, yes.
So all 3 of your books are published by En Route. Is that a relatively new publishing company?
Refractions and the Fatima book are published by En Route Books and Media, and the Pope Leo book is published by Preserving Christian Publications in Boonville, New York.
Oh, okay. Sorry about the mistake there. So,
okay.
For several decades, there have been, I'm just reading some of your stuff here, been much discussion on the famous third part of the Secret of Fatima. Originally communicated to the 3 seers of Fatima, the 3 children, 2 of the youngest already have been canonized. Jacinta, I couldn't think of the little boy's name. Francisco, yes. And, of course, Sister Lucia lived a long life in a convent in Spain, I believe. and she died fairly recently. I'm thinking 2018 or thereabouts.
No, she died about 16 years ago on February 13th, 2005.
Wow.
And I actually remember that day. That's kind of a special day in my life. I remember that day very vividly. In fact, I was still in college at my MA studies at the time, and I had gone to bed late, and I was just a quick funny story. I had gone to bed late, but before I went to bed, I checked the internet, the news, and right there, bold headlines: Sister Lucia of Fatima dies. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I ran around. I woke up my roommates. I was like, one of them, his name was, I'll call him Bob. Like, Bob. He's groggy. And I was like, Sister Lucia died. And immediately, like, he back to his senses. He was like, what? In a very clear tone, crisp in mind. But yeah, it was, I remember that day vividly. That was huge news in the Catholic world.
Was he so as excited about that news as you were, your roommate?
Well, we were all practicing Catholics, and this was serious news. Thankfully, my roommates we all understood and had mutual interests and stuff, and they were all like, "What? Are you serious?" I was like, "Yeah." And I'm happy to say somebody recently posted the entirety of her funeral on YouTube, so I was really happy to see that. Previously, there were little clips and pictures. Somebody put the whole thing, I think it's like 2 hours long, on YouTube, and I was really happy to have to see that.
She was 101 years old, wasn't she?
She was just shy of her 98th birthday.
Oh, well, I don't have anything right this morning. I'm glad you're here. Okay, but anyway, the long years of its remaining unpublished was accompanied by a desire by church officials not to discuss the matter. These two facts and others led to much speculation on the content of the third part of the secret, as well as to accusations of a cover-up on the part of the church hierarchy. The seemingly endless speculations and accusations have been more prominent since the release of the text in the year 2000, the text of the secret. To date, there has been no comprehensive refutation of specific arguments in response to the speculations and accusations. That fact has now been changed by Kevin Symonds' book on the third part of the Secret of Fatima. And that's our topic for discussion today. So you utilized material in 6 foreign languages, including information from the archives of the Sanctuary of Fatima itself, and weighed many of the arguments in support of conspiracy theories on the third part of the secret. You take the arguments head on, explore their sources, and critiques these conspiracies. Your findings produce some truly astonishing results that are sure to cause many to rethink their understanding of the message of Our Lady of Fatima. In this centennial year, this was in 2017, many of the faithful are renewing their interest in or discovering for the first time the message of Our Lady of Fatima. This book is not an introductory book, but I hope most Catholics are familiar with Our Lady of Fatima apparitions, in particular the major miracle, maybe the most profound miracle of any apparition in history, was the dancing of the sun and its plunging to the earth and drying up torrential rainfall and then going back into its normal place in the sky, which was seen by 60 to 70,000 people, photographed, and put in the daily papers the next day. So it's a major event in the history of the world, I would say. So 5 days ago, you presented a webinar on the third part of the Secret of Fatima. That webinar and text are available on his website, kevinsymonds.com, Kevin, K-E-V-I-N, Symonds, S-Y-M-O-N-D-S, SYMONDS.com. I saw your webinar last night and read the text, and I'm not an expert, so you're here to do the expert part. So we normally pray the Regina Caeli during the Easter season, and you've asked to say that prayer in Latin for us. and I'm happy to oblige you. I don't know if we'll understand it, but please feel free.
All right. Let me just yeah, I'm more familiar. I actually am not familiar with it in English. That's why I asked for it in Latin. I'm like, oh, I have to do Latin. Is that okay? Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So we just start now, or?
Sure.
Okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Regina Caeli, laetare, alleluia. Quiaquem meruisti portare, alleluia. Resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia. Ora pro nobis Deum, alleluia. Gaude laetare Virgo Maria, alleluia. Quia surrexit Dominus vere, alleluia. Oremus. Deus, qui per resurrectionem filii tui, Domini nostri Iesu Christi, mondum laetificare dignatus est, presta quesimus, ut per eius genetricem Virginem Mariam, perpetue capiamus gaudia vitae, per eundem Christum Dominum nostrum. Amen. Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, Kevin, thank you very much. I normally ask our guests to tell us a little bit about their lives. I read your bio here. Was there anything you'd like to add to what I already told the people about yourself?
Sure. I do apologize. I thought I had updated it, but apparently I was mistaken. I live in North Dakota now, and I moved from Michigan last year, so I just want to be clear on that. And then my last name is pronounced Symonds, like the exercise guy, but spelled differently and no relation. Those are just two quick clarifications. And that was my bad. I apologize. I should have been more clear on that earlier when we were talking beforehand.
Well, I saw both. I saw that version of your bio, and I thought that was an old one, so that's why I use the Michigan one. So anyway, thanks for clarifying that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought I had updated it on my website. Okay, all right. I thought I was starting to lose my mind here. I'm like, no, I'm only 39. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't unfortunately mean too much nowadays. That my brother just recently passed away about 2 months ago, and he was 38. So,
oh my gosh!
When your number's up, your number's up.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry about that. You have my sympathy. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we still don't know the official cause of death yet. We're still waiting to hear back from the medical examiners, but it looks like it was natural causes. So.
We lost a 27-year-old son a few years ago from natural causes. It just blew our minds. He was healthy, but I don't know. Okay, on the third part of the Secret of Fatima, would it be helpful to learn about the first and second part of the Secret? Is that a good way?
Yes, I think it's important just to kind of give a. I think it's probably better just to kind of give a quick overview. And first, let me start by saying you were very good to point out. It was very good to point out that my book on Fatima, the third part of the Secret of Fatima, is definitely not a beginner's book. It's not designed to be that way. It's designed to say, okay, we've had all of these conversations. Now let's look at them and let's run with it. And so you kind of have to have some background music playing in your head, as it were, to kind of really be able to jump into it. It's not a beginner's book. So, I have to be very careful and, to reaffirm that. That said, I do provide some basic historical outlines, like right at the beginning of the book, just to kind of orient people at the beginning. And then, we paint the picture, and then the subsequent chapters are kind of zooming in on some of those different aspects and looking at it more closely. Mm-hmm. So the general quick story of Fatima is that between May and October of 1917, Our Lady appeared to 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, Jacinta and Francisco Marto, who were brother and sister, and then Lucia dos Santos, who was their cousin. Our Lady appeared to them on the 13th of every month, except August, when the children had been kidnapped, and they weren't able to be at the designated location, which was called the Cova de Ira. They weren't able to be there that day, so Our Lady had appeared to them some days later in another place called Aljustro. And a couple of notable things had happened during the course of these apparitions, outside of the fact of the Blessed Mother appearing herself. But Our Lady had communicated a secret to the children on July 13, 1917, and then she had also promised that a miracle would be given to prove that these appearances were authentic. And that came on October the 13th of that same year, 1917, and it was in the form of what we today call the miracle of the sun, which you kind of gave the broad outline earlier about how the sun appeared in the sky despite the fact that it had been torrentially downpouring, the ground was soaked, clothes were soaked, and then the sun broke free from the clouds, and it started moving around in the sky. People thought the end of the world was going to happen. And then when the sun went back to its place in the sky, their clothes and the ground were bone dry. So it was very, very, very profound miracle witnessed by no less than 70,000 people. Some estimates have it a little bit higher, but everybody pretty much agrees that there was no less than 70,000 people. And then subsequently, other apparitions took place. Jacinta and Francisco had died by the end of February 1920. I think Francisco died in April of 1919 and Jacinta in February of 1920, I believe. So we're now just over 100 years after their deaths. But Sister Lucia, as we said earlier, she lived to be almost 100. She passed away on February 13, 2005. And gradually over time, the message of what Our Lady had said in Fatima was being revealed. Because in July of 1917, Our Lady had told them, when she communicated the secret, don't tell this to anybody. And this is one of the controversies, but what did Our Lady mean when she said, do not tell this to anyone? Yes, you may tell Francisco, because he could only hear, he can only see but not hear Our Lady. So he saw the vision, but he didn't know what it meant. So that one controversy is, what did Our Lady mean? Did she mean the secret overall, or just the third part? Some people misunderstood what Our Lady was referring to. She was referring to the secret itself. But long story short, the secret had been given in 3 different parts, that way, as we learned later. But we only gradually knew these things because, as Our Lady had said, do not tell this to anyone. The visionaries were very circumspect and very closed-mouthed about it. They were trying to obey what Our Lady had told them. So then, of course, Francisco and Jacinta died, and then Sister Lucia lives, to a very old age, and gradually she had written down what the Secret of Fatima was. She began doing so in the mid to late 1930s, early 1940s, through 4 different documents called her memoirs. And there were 4 that she wrote at the time, and it was I think the 3rd memoir is where she reveals the first 2 parts of the secret. She had concluded that she had heaven's permission. We don't really know exactly how she knew that, but she at least had a prophetic sense that when the bishop had told her to write down these memoirs, because that's why she wrote them down in the bishop's order, that was heaven's will for her to be able to do that. But she reserved the 3rd part. She said that she didn't think that she had heaven's permission for that, so she only wrote about the first 2. And then around the 4th memoir was written in 1942, I think it was, and shortly thereafter she fell gravely ill, and people thought she was no longer going to be. They thought she was going to die. So people were pressuring the Bishop of Fatima, Don Jose de Silva, to order her to write it down. And he always kind of had a hands-off approach with these matters, with secrets, heavenly secrets and stuff like that. So he was very cautious and didn't really want to have that in general. So I like him to worry about it, that is. So he was initially reluctant, but eventually what happened was he consented and ordered her to write it down. And then that kind of led to some trouble for Sister Lucia, because Our Lady had told her, don't write it down, but now the bishop is telling her to write it down. And she tried to obey her religious superiors as if it was an order from God. So she struggled to write down the third part of the secret. And this is another one of those controversies. What was the reason why she struggled? There are some people who have interpreted Sister Lucia's difficulty in writing it down as her being terrified of the third part of the secret. Well, this was one of the chapters of my book that as I was researching, I went back to the original documents and I discovered what happened. Sister Lucia was not terrified of it. She didn't know who to obey, the Virgin Mary or the bishop. So that was she literally had the paper in front of her. She had the pen in hand, and if she had the intention to write it down, her hand could not cross the paper with the pen. But if she put her mind to set about writing a letter to a friend or a relative, whatever, well, she could do it without thought, question, hesitation. So eventually, this difficulty was resolved in early January 1944. Our Lady appeared to her and said to her, because Lucia was very much in consternation over this question of obedience. So Our Lady appeared to her and said to her, God wished to test your faith, humility, and obedience. Write what they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. When you have finished, put the text in an envelope, seal it, and write on the outside that this can only be opened by the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Bishop of Leiria, which was the Bishop of Fatima at the time. There was a name change. Now it's called the Diocese of Leiria Fatima. They had the hyphen there. So, long story short, I'm sorry, hold on one second. Somebody is... I don't know what is going on here. My phone acting up on me all of a sudden. I apologize for that. So what happens is we don't know this information about what Our Lady had said. And because of our ignorance on that point, there were many speculations that arose over the course of time, because people knew that Sister Lucia had written down the text. They knew that it had been sealed in an envelope. They knew that it had been in the possession of the bishop of Fatima, Don Jose, and there was even an article in Life magazine about it, with a picture of the envelope in front of the bishop on his desk. So everybody was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And because of that date of 1960, which was also known to the public, everybody thought that Our Lady had said that it could be published in 1960. And that was the expectation, that it was going to be opened and revealed to the world in 1960. Well, 1960 came and went, and that's not what happened. By that point, the document had moved from Portugal to the Vatican, so now it was under the control of the Pope. And there's some interesting facts around that transfer that we might look at a little bit later, but once it was in the hands of the Holy See, it was subjected to a new set of circumstances that, how should I say this? I think the best way to say it is, it was then subjected to a new set of circumstances that basically determined the fate of the document. So John the 23rd opened it when he was at Castel Gandolfo in August of 1959, and he talked with some people about it. They couldn't make heads or tails of it, apparently. They had it translated by one of the minutantes of the Secretary of State, Paulo Tavares, Monsignore Paulo Tavares, who was Portuguese, but he was bilingual at least. And he later became the Bishop of Nassau over there in Asia. He translated it for them, but they ultimately decided that. How should I say this? They ultimately decided not to reveal it, not to publish it, and basically to shelve it. And quite literally, what happened was it ended up in a drawer of John the 23rd's desk at the Vatican, in the papal apartments of the Vatican. That's where it ended up, for a little while anyway. And then when he passed away in 1963, Pope Paul VI was elected, and one of the first things that he did as Pope was he had his guy, I think it was Monsignore Dell'Acqua, call up John the 23rd's personal secretary, Monsignore Loris Capovilla, who only recently died. He passed away 5-6 years ago. So they got a hold of Capovilla, and they said, "Where is the envelope with the Secret of Fatima?" And he said, "It should be in the desk, the right-hand side of the desk called Barbarigo." So they opened it up, found it, and did whatever they did with it. And they decided, again, not to publish it. Now we have the rest of Paul VI papacy, of course. He dies in 78. That's the year of the three popes. John Paul I is elected. And he already had some history with Fatima because he met Sister Lucia privately at the convent in Coimbra, which is a fact universally acknowledged even by the Holy See itself. So whether or not he knew the content of the third part of the secret after he became Pope, there's some speculation about whether or not he had seen the letter himself. We're not sure, or at least if it is known, I don't recall it off the top of my head, so my apologies if my memory is failing me. So he was only Pope about, 33 days or so, 33, 34 days. He dies. John Paul II is elected. And there's some confusion here, too, because there's conflicting stories about when John Paul II first read the third part of the secret. This remains an open question, actually. As a matter of fact, let me ask you first, would you like an exclusive on this?
Kevin, you're in charge. It's
okay.
Now,
well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you an exclusive. If anybody wants to know about this story, they have to come to your podcast, your channel here to hear this information. Okay, what happened was in 1978, John Paul II, of course, was elected, and according to the official Vatican story that was published later on, John Paul II first read the third part of the secret in July of 1981 after the assassination attempt. However, the Holy See's spokesman, Dr. Joaquin Navarro-Valls, who passed away in 2017, he publicly stated to the Associated Press that in May, I think May 13th, I want to say, of 2000, that the first time John Paul II first read the text was in 1978, shortly after he was elected Pope. So the Vatican is saying one thing, but the Holy See spokesman, Dr. Navarro-Valls, is saying another, which has led to some of the problems. People are saying, well, there must be another text. This was those problem areas in the Fatima history. Well, I'm in a position to reveal, and this is an exclusive to your broadcast. Very shortly before he died, I was able to contact Dr. Navarro-Valls. I'm talking like 3-4 months before he died, if I remember my facts correctly. And I spoke to him via email, and I said to him, I'm really confused. Basically, to summarize the correspondence, I said to him, I'm really confused. Could you shed light on this? the Holy See saying 81, but you're quoted as having said 78. Could you shed some light on this, please? He actually did. He stuck to his guns, and I have it in print. He said to me, the first time John Paul II read the text was 1978. Those were his, as far as I know, last words on Fatima. And he gave those words to me. He may have said something else in the 3 or 4 months of his life that he had remaining, but I don't know about it. But as far as I know, that's the last time he spoke on Fatima, at least privately, shortly before he died. So he leaves us with a dilemma. Why does the Vatican say 81? But why does he, the former spokesman who worked closely with John Paul II, why is he saying 78? Well, that's a question that remains. I think the answer is very simple. I think that the Holy See, I think it's likely that they didn't want to have the Pope's image look bad. So, make it look like he was, now I don't want to say greedy or intemperate is probably the better word. They don't want to make the Pope look intemperate, that almost as soon as he's elected, boom, what does he do? He goes to look for the text of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. Like he wants to satisfy some kind of a morbid curiosity, which is what a lot of people had regarding the third part of the Secret of Fatima. And I was talking with one of my priest friends about this a couple of months ago, and he said to me, he's like, Kevin, he's like, what you're saying makes total sense, because you have to understand those years, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. He says everybody wanted to know what the third part of the secret was. He said, and if there was only one person, the Pope, that had the right to know what that text was, he said it was unthinkable for a Pope, even a newly elected one, not to go gunning for that text to find out what it said. Mm-hmm. He says my priest friend said to me, it's unthinkable, but that wouldn't have happened. So in other words, he thought that my hypothesis held water. That's what he was trying to say. Mm-hmm. And I maintain my hypothesis on this matter. I think that John Paul II first read the text in 1978, and I think that the Vatican gave the later date because they were trying to protect the Holy Father's image. That's what I suspect happened. I might be wrong, and I don't necessarily think that the Holy See was wrong. If I'm correct, I don't think that the Holy See was wrong to do that. But again, this is all theory. This is all in the realm of speculation. We don't possess the historical documents at this time to settle it one way or another. I'm just putting out a theory because this contradiction is public of those two dates, and I'm just putting out this theory.
Well, why is it important to know exactly when John Paul II read The Secret? I mean, there's now several people that you have mentioned that are familiar with The Secret. It's no longer a secret.
Yes.
I mean, a whole bunch of people.
The reason why it's important is because later on, when the Holy See eventually published the text in the year 2000, there arose a lot of controversy over how to think of this text, how to make sense of it, et cetera, et cetera. And one of these ideas that came out was that the Holy See was hiding a second text. From the year 2000 to 2006, I call this the two-text hypothesis in my writings, or the two-text theory. There was a certain group of people, I don't know if I'm allowed to, actually, would you mind clarifying for me real quick? Am I allowed to mention names? Respectfully and charitably, of course, but am I allowed to mention names?
Of course.
Okay.
The truth.
There was an organization called the Fatima Center that was headed by a Canadian cleric named Father Nicholas Gruner. And some of his close followers, Andrew Cesanik, Christopher Ferrara, Father Paul Kramer, they put these ideas and these theories out there that there was this second text, and that this second text contained information to help us understand the meaning of the third part of the secret. Because when the text was published in June 26th of 2000, it was a description of a vision, but there was no explanation of this vision that was given in the same text. So this theory was put out there that there was a second text being withheld by the Vatican because it was so explosive and damning that they didn't want it out there in the public. That was the theory. So if you have a theory, you're going to look for evidence to support your theory, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if there are two dates being given as to when John Paul II read the text, you see where this is going?
No.
If there were two dates, then that lends credence to the theory that there was two texts
of the secret. I mean, we're focused on the third part, but the secret that she wrote down has 1, 2, 3 parts. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the first 2 parts were revealed much earlier. And what did they say?
In the early 1940s, yes.
What did they say?
The first part is a vision of hell, and it's actually very simple. The first word, it's divided into 2 parts. Some people call it 1A, 1B, but the first part of the secret has 2 parts. The vision of hell, 1A, if you will, and then the explanation, 1B. And it's very simple. They see it. The children see the vision, and Our Lady says to them, quote, "You have seen hell where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them." Now that's basically the end of the first part of the secret. Then Our Lady goes into the second part of the secret, which is the revelation of the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. She says, in order to save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart, promising to save it by these means. And then she goes further in detail, and she predicts a lot of things that will happen because Our Lady makes some certain requests. 2 in particular. She requests the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart. And then she also says that there will be a new devotion established in the world called the 5 First Saturdays. And depending upon whether or not the Church responds to these requests, one of 2 things were going to happen: good things or bad things. The good was that the certain errors that were going to be promoted by Russia would not really take place. But if Russia was not consecrated to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, then all of these terrible errors are going to be spread throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions. The Holy Father would have much to suffer. Various nations would be annihilated. Many good people will be martyred, she says. That's all the second part of the secret. And then the ending of the second part of the secret is, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith shall always be preserved. After the last word of that sentence, Lucia puts the word etc., and that's where the third part went.
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, the third part, there was about 60 years in between it was written down and finally published, but the third part showed a vision of a pope, bishops, cardinals, priests, laymen, and women making their way towards this giant cross. There's a hill, there's a half-ruined city, and they're being shot at with bullets and arrows, and they're being killed. And there are angels that are gathering up the blood of these people and sprinkling it upon them, to those that are still making their way up towards this cross. And Our Lady, there's also an angel present with a flaming sword saying, "Penance, penance, penance." And Our Lady standing there with rays coming from her Immaculate Heart, and they were prohibiting the flames from the angel's sword. So how do we make sense of what does the text of this vision mean? That's what people were asking after it was released. They're like, well, wait, what? They're like, why did you wait 40 years to publish this? So there's a lot of questions that surround all of this. We really can't get into the whole story, but this is what developed was this two-text theory.
Mm-hmm.
Was that there was a second text with the explanation of what those images of the vision meant. The Pope at one point is shot and killed in the vision. And many people believed that was foretelling John Paul II's assassination attempt in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there was a lot of back and forth for many years, and then in 2006, there was some new information that came out that was published by an Italian journalist named Antonio Socci. He published a book called The Fourth Secret of Fatima, called the Secret of Fatima in Italian. And this was explosive new evidence straight from John the 23rd's personal secretary, who I mentioned earlier, Monsignore Lourdes Capovilla, who indicated that there, in fact, may have been another text. Well, that just blew everybody off. And that was a firestorm for the next few years. Rome even got involved. The Holy See got involved in that discussion and debate. And it went back and forth again for many years. And then in 2013, the tide of the conversations and debates turned again, because in October of that year, Sister Lucia's Carmelite sisters in Coimbra, Portugal, where she lived for almost about 55, 56 years or so, they published a biography of her called A Pathway Under the Gaze of Mary. And in it, that's when they revealed Our Lady's words in that apparition of January 1944 that I mentioned earlier, about how write what they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. So we now know that Our Lady had mandated Sister Lucia not to reveal the meaning. That explained why the third part of the secret had no explanation that accompanied it. But it also put to rest, or severely questioned, the fourth secret, the two-text hypothesis. Because if the Virgin Mary commanded Sister Lucia not to reveal the third part of the secret, the meaning that is, how, therefore, can there be another text with that explanation? See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It just doesn't make sense. You would have to show that sometime between 1944 and, let's say, 1959, when John the 23rd read the text, you'd have to show that Our Lady appeared to Sister Lucia again, or somehow communicated with her and told her, okay, it's okay, you have my permission now, go ahead, do it. You'd have to show that. And there's nothing in the historical record that proves that. So as far as we know, there was no second text with an explicit explanation from Sister Lucia saying, these are the words of Our Lady explaining this vision. It just doesn't exist. So after the biography was published in 2013 and news of it leaked into the English-speaking world, and that's when I found out about it, I nearly fell over. I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's that simple? So it sparked me. I was doing some research for my book on Pope Leo XIII and the prayer to St. Michael at the time. And then this news fell into my lap, and I said, oh my goodness, wow. And it coincided with some of my research for the St. Michael book. So that's how my book on the third part of Secret of Fatima came to be. It kind of dovetailed with the ending of the research for the St. Michael book. And long story short, what I discovered was that with this new information provided by the Carmelites, we were now able to revisit some of these old haunts, these old debates and all this other stuff from a fresh perspective. And that is what made my book possible. I'll even reveal a personal detail. In 2017, I was able to visit the Carmel of Coimbra in Portugal, and I spoke with the prioress who speaks English. And I was in tears as I held up a copy of the biography that they had published, and I thanked them. I thanked her. I said, "Thank you so much." I said, "This book." These are my words. I said, "This book is a gift to my country. Thank you so much. It made my book possible." She was very grateful, and I think they're just happy that devotees of Fatima are really benefiting from this book, and we truly are. We truly are. It's enlightening. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book, and it really introduces you to the soul, the beautiful soul of Sister Lucia.
You're talking about your book.
Something I'm going to be focusing upon in future webinars, in fact.
You mean you basically researched and extracted from the Carmelite book the important things that made your book unique. Is that what you're saying?
Some of it, yes. It made my book possible insofar as this revelation from the Carmelites about what happened in 1944 really helped to give me the drive to say, well, where else can we find more information? And that's what eventually sparked my book. It kind of got my book in process. So I started looking at the literature, some of these conspiratorial pieces of literature, and my general basic conclusion is this. What was this? People like Father Gruner, they weren't entirely wrong, but they weren't entirely correct either. So the basic example I can give for that is Gruner's fundamental position, as I said in my webinar last week, was that there was something else that we didn't get with respect to the third part of the Secret of Fatima. Insofar as those words are concerned, that they are true. However he argued it, that remains very much in debate because he was a highly polemical individual. He allowed a lot of polemics and very heated words to be said. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it's still available on YouTube, but you can watch one of those moments on YouTube where he was permitting and even engaging in some of these discussions that took place after the publication of Antonio Sochi's book. It was a conference held in May of 2010, I believe. I think it was. It was very heated, shall we say. People were very fired up, and it was all caught on video, and it was put up on YouTube. I don't know if it's still available or not. I'd have to look, but it was available a few years ago. So you can see evidence of what I'm saying if you watch this particular video. So he was correct insofar as I said, there was something else, but you can't accuse the Holy See of covering it up when it was in fact Our Lady who said, "Don't write it down." That's where he made a mistake. He went too far in arguing his case. He may do with the best information that he had at the time, but I think that he should have kept it, I don't want to say more basic, but he should have kept it to what was absolutely 100% positively, demonstrably factual. But unfortunately, he went a little too far aside, and it really hurt his argument and made him look bad at the same time. And I say this with all due respect, of course, no animus. This is just I'm just speaking towards the facts. That's all, and I say it with all charity. I don't mean to be mean in any of this. So now that we know these things, we can go back and look at, okay, well, where did people go wrong? What happened? And that's what I did with my book. So I mentioned earlier, one of the pieces of my research was the terrified Sister Lucia interpretation, why she couldn't write down the third part in 1943 and 1944. Now we now know it was because she was confused over who to obey, Our Lady or the bishop. There was another...
she kind of forced her to obey her. Mary forced her to obey her by making her unable to write down something, right?
Well, this is where we get into one of the finer aspects of Fatima and its history. At the end of my book, I think it was the epilogue, I make the remark that in the future, Fatima studies are going to be, or at least should be and ought to be, intimately bound up with studying the character, the spirituality of Sister Lucia. And let me tell you why. She was the primary interlocutor with Our Lady in 1917. She lived the longest. She was the one who wrote about Fatima voluminously to tell us about it and what happened. We have very little to no writings from Saints Jacinta and Francisco Marto, her cousins. There's very little from them. Most of what we know comes filtered through Lucia. So you have to understand the person, the life, the character, the spirituality of Sister Lucia. And we know a couple of things already. And when seen in the totality of her person, we can begin to understand why she did certain things. So, for instance, one of the things that we know is that she was very circumspect about her supernatural experiences. She did not like talking about it. You had to put her under a direct order of obedience for her to talk about it. And so when we put that back now to the question of the third part of the Secret in 1944, it makes total sense why Our Lady said to her, God wished to test, provar in Portuguese, your faith, humility, and obedience. God was developing virtue in her through this act. And it was meant to be, and therefore, what then does that, this was going to be known to the public, what then does that say for us? What does this reveal about God? What does it say for how he works with us, how we ourselves should respond to him? Sister Lucia, actually, Our Lady had said to her with the envelopes, she said, put it in an envelope, seal it, and write on the outside that it can only be opened in 1960 by these two people, one or the other or both, right? Well, what happens is Sister Lucia she was a nun. She had no money. This is wartime. This is 1944 Portugal. This is war. Now, granted, Portugal did not enter World War II, but they're going to suffer still some effects of it because they're right next door to people that are fighting it, and they're right there in Europe. So what happens is Sister Lucia goes to her superior. This is how serious she took obedience. She goes to her superior and says, I need something to seal a letter, and to seal a document, a letter. And the superior goes, well, what letter is this? And this is in the biography. You can read it from the Carmelites. Sister Lucia just kind of puts her head down and doesn't answer the question because she couldn't reveal it. She couldn't say, Our Lady told me to write something and give it to the... You see what I'm saying? She would have looked like a nutcase. So she just put her head down and just rather sheepishly walked off. Well, then she went to go. She said a prayer to our Lord in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and then she goes out and does some task. And then what happens is she goes to empty a trash can, and there at the bottom of the trash can is green wax at the bottom of the trash can. So she basically says, thanks be to God. She goes back to the superior and says, I found this in its wastebasket. May I use it, please? And by the point, now the superior is like, she's laughing her head off because she thinks she's like, this is a worthless little trinket. Please, do whatever you need to do with it, you know. And that's how the green seals got on the envelopes. But we only know that carried the third part of the Secret of Panama. But we only know that because the Carmelites told us the story. And they knew the story because Sister Lucia had written it down in one of her private manuscripts.
Kevin, our time is past. We have to stop. You want to continue this story next week?
Sure. I'd be up for that.
I
know we just get really into it, right? It's a lot of fun, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're going to stop.
You've gotten our interest, I'm sure. I hope, certainly mine. And where's it going to go? Where's it going to lead? Anyway, we'll count on you for next week. And thank you all for listening, and thank you, Kevin, for being with us today. I look forward to next Tuesday. God bless all of us. Bye now.
God bless. Thank you.